I remember when superheroes used to be great. I remember when the genre was fun and experimental, when everything was new and different. Forget the movies, even the trailers were must-see events. I watched endless episodes on TV and even on VHS. Whoa, I'm not that old. My house just had a cassette player. The 2000s were a transition period, alright? But eventually the novelty wore off. Fans got tired of being burned so many times and their expectations increased so much that even decent movies and shows were left in the dust. However, superhero content never died. Not all of it anyway. It simply grew up with us. See, there was a stereotype with superheroes, and that was the divide. Live action was for violence, drama, and grown-up heroes. Animation would be for kids and teens with bloodless fights and happy endings. But that divide has been broken time and time again. Lots of projects have treaded that line between what was considered kid-friendly and what wasn't. Now, superhero content isn't a catch-all for all ages anymore. That's because the genre has expanded with the audience. Whether it's games, shows, or movies, the audience depends on the project. Like, these two are made by the same guy in the same year in the same universe. However, looking back on it, there was one project that broke the divide before anyone else realized it. An anomaly that didn't play by the rules at all. And that anomaly was The Incredibles. The Incredibles isn't adapted from an existing comic book, but surely it must have been inspired by comic books, right?
Well, not really. No, actually.
Director Brad Bird mentions that he was not a big comic book reader and that no previous comic book had specifically informed the Incredibles story. He said, quote, "If there are similarities, it's simply because the same thoughts that occurred to other people also occurred to me." End quote. But he emphasized that he wasn't seeking out to make The Incredibles a love letter to the superhero genre. He said, quote, "That's not the part of the story that I'm interested in anyway. The part that I'm interested in is all the personal stuff. I tried to base the powers on family archetypes." End quote. So instead of making a regular superhero flick, Brad Bird focused on the relatable aspects like family, marital problems, and a midlife crisis. Not only that, it tackled serious themes relating to politics and its effect on the downfall of the supers, and it wasn't afraid to show dark things like terrorism, mass murder, attempted child murder, and suicide. But at the same time, there's still appeal to superhero fans with the big robots, colorful costumes, and the creative action, things that kids could also enjoy. In that way, The Incredibles proved that the genre could be mature without being strictly adult. Now, turn the clocks forward years later to when The Incredibles 2 came out. The tone, style, and story were remarkably different from its predecessor. I'm not even talking about the animation here. The result wasn't necessarily bad, it just felt different. Why was that? Well, it's because superheroes weren't built for this.
He's out of line, but he's right.
Once the superhero genre exploded in popularity, it expanded its audience to virtually all ages, and as a result, its appeal had to be updated too. That meant making many of these movies more digestible for the widest possible audience. And it worked. That's how Marvel found its stride and became the biggest movie franchise. But eventually, the winning formula gets formulaic. After Endgame, Marvel fell into a slump with COVID and the MCU was starting to feel a bit too disconnected, as many projects had little to no payoff.
Where's my Shang-Chi sequel, Kevin?
And DC, well, they didn't really have direction for the most part anyways, so. By the early 2020s, the market for superheroes had become oversaturated, predictable, and too safe. You could guess what tropes a movie would follow, and you would no longer feel the need to see every single cape slap movie in theaters anymore. And this is an issue that is still happening today. Is it ever going to get better?
Your savior is here!
During the superhero slump, audiences yearned for something different from everything that came before. That's why things like Spider-Verse and the Batman stood out, because they remind you of what you loved. But they also brought something new to the table, which is something that the other superhero movies hadn't been doing. But there was still the issue of this wider gap that was created by the genre. Things like Invincible and Dispatch stepped into the picture and they filled that gap perfectly. They understood something that Marvel and DC forgot only until recently. Their audience grew up. These projects realized that the fans are people who grew up with superheroes, so they paid tribute to that era in their own way. But they also understood that those fans are now adults. You can't use the same cliche tropes and archetypes and dialogue over and over again and expect it to work for the 3,000th time. So instead, Skybound and Ad Hoc Studio did several things. 1. They embrace the violence and brutal nature of their heroes without overindulging. Obviously, Invincible became a straightaway hit by having Omni-Man kill the Guardians of the Globe in episode 1, and by the end of the season, we see him wreak havoc on Chicago in the most brutal spanking that a father has given to a son. But this isn't just violence for the sake of violence, it serves a purpose, which is why it doesn't feel overdone. There's emotion to these fights, it's almost like a dance. 2. They tackled serious topics that were relevant. Topics like identity crises, relationship failures, and depression. Much like The Incredibles, these projects don't skirt around these issues. Rather, they embrace them head on. Dispatch does this in a big way through Phenomenon, who at first glance seems like a stereotypical cape-donning superhero, and with all that we've seen in recent years, you can't help but think that he's hiding a dark side. But he's not. It's just that being a superhero is his whole life. His identity is Phenomenon. There's nothing else. He loves Blonde Blazer because he's drawn to her power and her persona, and doesn't understand why she wouldn't want that all the time. He doesn't understand human vulnerability, not because he's from a more powerful race that wants to increase its numbers and subjugate the weak. I'll make a future video about that. But he's just an emotionally unintelligent guy with good intentions, who has a different perspective on what it means to be a hero. And we see him deal with his breakup and get back on his feet with Robert's help, and he turns out to be refreshingly more optimistic than we thought he'd be. This is an example of a good spin on things.
The ladies at the Nordstrom rack I worked at called me Dumpy.
3. In addition to this, superhero media isn't afraid of putting heavy themes at the center of their stories and character arcs. Omni-Man has to live with the guilt of all that he's done and learn how to move past centuries of Viltrumite propaganda in order to become truly good for his family. That leads to depression and near suicide, something that he can only overcome by rediscovering his purpose in the universe. Invincible has to grapple with his Viltrumite and human identities, all while dealing with his father's legacy and his duty as a hero. And in the same vein, Dumpy here has to learn the meaning of self-worth and exploring his identity beyond being a hero. That is something that Megamind actually does really well with Metro Man.
Hello, everybody. Metro
Man contemplates the mantle that society placed on him versus what he wants to do. And because of that, he learns that he has to stop being a hero so that he can pursue what he loves, and in turn inspire Megamind to fulfill his potential as a hero and therefore use his mind for Mega.
Say that again?
I mean for good. And it works. Similar to this, Robert's absence as Mecha Man allows him to build personal relationships with ex-villains and potential heroes. If it weren't for his dispatch job, Phenomenon might not have moved on. But most importantly, what do these projects do? Well, the answer to that is
perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Something that you may have noticed is that I didn't talk about The Boys in this video, despite it seemingly checking all the boxes of a modern, dark superhero project. But where it misses the mark is balance. Invincible, Dispatch, and even Marvel and DC have succeeded when they create stability by keeping enough fiction to provide escapism and enough reality in order to ground the story and make it relatable, and therefore compelling. But where these other projects stand apart from The Boys is that they keep it real without making it real. This is where The Boys falls flat, because in its quest to prevent itself as the anti-Marvel, it basically pulls a Zack Snyder by making their universe dark and gritty, and then also tries to make itself realistic by taking inspiration from real-life events or politics. Like, don't be surprised if you get a Mangione or a Diddy joke in the next season. And even then, it still falls victim to the same tropes it aimed to subvert.
Now you have become the very thing you swore to destroy.
On top of that, Marvel and DC themselves have been dabbling in darker projects like the Batman and Daredevil Born Again, which themselves are more realistic. The novelty of grit in the superhero genre has worn off, so what do people expect from these projects these days? You know what they expect? Good storytelling. That's why the genre is still alive, because despite the cape slop, despite the same old, we still have amazing projects. Spectacular projects, even. Invincible and Dispatch, among other projects, survived and thrived by keeping the audience in mind. The best creators grow with their audience, so they stopped chasing the formula, started trusting the process, and focused on what makes a story feel real. And hey, even amongst the big players, things are looking optimistic as they adapt according to the audience. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you want a good superhero project, put a guy with a mustache in it. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any suggestions for the next video, please be sure to leave a comment and also show some support by liking and subscribing. It means a lot, and the support I've gotten over the last year has been immense and amazing and overwhelming a little bit, so I hope we can continue this momentum for the future. Take care.
See.